Yeah, Donald Trump, in his primetime address on Wednesday, again badgered traditional allies, particularly when it came to the energy crisis that the war with Iran has triggered.
To those countries that can't get fuel, many of which refuse to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, we had to do it ourselves. I have a suggestion. Number one, buy oil from the United States of America. We have plenty. We have so much. And number two, build up some delayed courage. Should have done it before, should have done it with us, as we asked. Go to the Strait and just take it, protect it.
Well, with us to talk about it is Manlio Graziano, his latest book in Italian, How We Go to War. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you for inviting me.
Your reaction to that clip we just heard, buy our oil and go and free up the Strait of Hormuz yourselves.
I was thinking yesterday when I heard these ideas circulating that it's like, for example, you smash a window and then you call your neighbors to pay for it. And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the war started because the United States wanted it to start. And then they wanted the others to clean the mess, essentially, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, the war started without consulting anybody, without preparing anybody, without doing anything to have some allies, and then you ask the others to.
So when you have a superpower that's got 38,000 troops in Europe, leaders, even if they don't agree with him, handle him with care. But we have seen this week Italy refusing a plane to land at an airbase in Sicily, for instance. We saw France and Spain dig in on that regards. Is Europe finding its feet in terms of pushing back?
Probably it's the beginning of a process, just the beginning. The case of Sigonella in Italy maybe should be relativized because it's not really a refusal. It's complicated, more complicated than it was presented, especially in the rest of the world. But still, I think that Meloni as well has to think what she wants to do when she grows up, because, I mean, it's a new situation in which precisely they still need Americans, but they know that they cannot trust Americans anymore. And not just because of Trump, but because of a long trend of the United States, which was more or less the same even at the time of Obama, if you want, because the pivot to Asia was a kind of disengagement from the Mediterranean in general, Europe as well. So, by the way, there is a book of memories, political memories written
Memoirs.
Written by Helmut Schmidt.
The former German chancellor.
Exactly. In 1986 it was published, and he said, this trend of taking away, going away from Europe or taking distances from Europe started with Jimmy Carter. So it's a long trend, and today we arrived to a point where it looks like we are at the decisive turning point. So Europeans...
There's confusion there, because you talked about an Asia pivot. But what we've seen since February the 28th is a pivot away from Asia.
Exactly.
They've even taken an amphibious warship, the USS Tripoli, away from near Japan's waters and brought it to the Gulf.
Exactly. And this is the sign and the symptom of the confusion at the helm of the United States, because they did have a strategy built during the decades from, this movement toward Asia started with Jimmy Carter. And today, they don't know what to do, or even, rather, they have so many different ideas within the administration that they are going in different directions without a head. It's like, when you cut the head of a chicken is still running for a while. And more or less when I think of the United States.
When was the head of the chicken cut off? Was it since Trump came to power? Or is
yes, this is the final cut, yes.
You wrote a piece this past week where you said the old hegemonic power has thus become progressively less hegemonic. Now you hark back there to the 1970s, but really, when did the United States lose that hegemonic status? Because there are some who still argue that it is still the hegemon, right? It owns financial services. It owns the internet to a large degree. It has the world's largest military. It's not over yet, the United States.
No, it's not over yet, and this is the problem because it is still by far the most powerful country in the world. Let's think only to the military side of the stuff. So it's powerful enough to make big disasters, but it's not an hegemon anymore, in the sense that the hegemon is able to control the situation. And the United States today is not controlling the situation, not in the world, is not controlling the situation of the United States. That's the problem. This is why I was thinking of a chicken without a head, because it's harming, the policy of the administration is harming, first of all, the United States, because when you don't know where to go.
But to many, it was projecting strength. You look, last year, China eased off when the U.S. said it wanted to seize the Panama Canal. 2026 begins with the seizing of Venezuela's president. People denounce it, you've denounced it as a kidnapping. But nonetheless, they did it with 0 U.S. casualties. It's to a degree you can say that's a show of strength.
I don't think it's a
February
show
the
of strength.
28th is when it all turns.
Yeah, no, because one thing is to be able to operate with your military, but another thing is completely different is to have a strategy, to know what you want to achieve. And this is how you show your strength. Of course, as I said, the United States is sufficiently strong yet to create a disorder in the entire world with the tariffs, with the armies, whatever they have.
The first anniversary today of those Liberation Day tariffs.
Yeah, it's today. Yes, it's first anniversary, and it has a huge power on nuisance, but it's not leading anymore. That's the problem. And
why? Why is that?
Because today there are
can't be
many.
Because of one person. It's got to be
No. It's a trend. But the trend you were asking when it started. I think it started when Nixon, for the first time, sorry, I go
1970s.
In 1971, for the first time, said that the United States is no longer able to rule the entire world. So we need allies. And it was probably since 1971 was the explanation he gave to the opening to China. So at that time, Nixon and Kissinger they acknowledged the change. And why they did? Because the United States lost the Vietnam War. So a country that was able to win from 1941, 1945, 2 different wars, one in Europe and one in Asia, against 2 military superpower like Germany and Japan, noticed that they discovered that they were no longer able to win a small war against a guerrilla. So it was... They called that a half war in the military language.
Right, and since then they've had the setbacks in Iraq and Afghanistan. But as I say again, it's still, as you were saying, a big hegemon. That brings us, in a way, to our book, because right now we're in a situation where we have not one, but 2 wars at Europe's doorstep, and the United States is an essential player in both of them. In the sense that U.S. support has helped to keep Ukraine from losing to Russia at the outset. Now we don't know which way it's going to go with Donald Trump. And then, of course, is what's happening with Iran. One of the questions is, we've had this period of peace in Europe, really since even during the Cold War, to a large degree. So we've had this long period of peace. When does war become possible? We've heard the French chief of staff saying we could be at war within 3 years.
Yep.
When does war become possible, and when does war actually happen?
It depends which war we are talking about, because for Europe, for example, I think the waking call was the invasion of Ukraine, because they discovered that not just that Russia was a danger, because I don't think that Russia can invade Europe or any country of Europe, because they were not able to conquer Ukraine. They just took 90% of Ukraine. But still, that was a waking call, because they knew that they couldn't count on the protection of the United States anymore, not at least not as it was the case during the Cold War, because the peace in Europe was guaranteed by the division of Europe between the Russians and Americans. So Americans had interest in keeping its allies calm and not to make a war against each other. And Russians, the same in their part of Europe. So this is the real reason.
So what, it's the seizing of Crimea in 2014, that's the real turning point?
Yeah, in particular the second invasion in 2022, because in 2014, Donald Trump was not yet in the view.
And this is interesting, because a lot of your book is devoted to the narratives, how you sell it, how you get people whipped into a frenzy to go to war. Ukrainians go to great pains to say, no, the war did not start in February of 2022. Yeah. It started in 2014, because for 8 years,
sure,
a lot of people here didn't really want to believe there was a war in Europe.
They didn't want to recognize a war, because when you think of the two Minsk agreement, that was a way for Europeans, particularly France and Germany, to say, okay, you shouldn't have done that. It's not good, but it's done. So let's find a solution to calm down things. So essentially, Europeans didn't want to be involved more than they were objectively, and this is what they did. The real surprise for them was the invasion of February 2022, because they didn't expect that. They didn't expect that Russia, despite the two agreements in Minsk, would attack Ukraine. And then they started being, maybe there is a problem here. And there is a problem.
And they didn't even believe Joe Biden when he said, yes, the Russians are going to invade. Quick final question for you. Your book talks about how to change the narratives that lead to war?
It's very difficult to change the narrative, because the narrative is something that it's a two-part narrative. One is the psychological need of people to be protected. When they feel that there is a threat, they want to be protected. And the other is the propaganda. Propaganda is what gives the motivations. People want to be protected, and instinctively is a coward reaction. I'm afraid. I wanted to duck under the table. Propaganda gives them noble motivations. So, and if you put together these two parts, you have the narrative. But you need both, not just one. The fear alone is not sufficient, and the propaganda alone is not sufficient.
The book is called How We Go to War. Manlio Graziano. So thanks, so many thanks for being with us here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Stay with us. There's much more to come, more news, and we'll be speaking with French astronaut Thomas Pesquet about the launch of that mission around the moon that took off from Cape Canaveral late on Wednesday. You're watching France 24.